Hey everybody, Joe Borey from Syncoplay Retro Gaming, and these are a few launch year Super Nintendo games that I think you should give another try. So back in 1991, when I was only 9 years old, the Super Nintendo was announced in Nintendo Power magazine, and I was so excited. I was already a fan of fantasy adventure games, playing games like Final Fantasy and Dragon Warrior, but there was a whole new realm of fantasy adventure games that had got announced that year, including Final Fantasy II. But Final Fantasy II was not actually the one that initially caught my eye. The first one I was really excited about at that time was actually Drakkhen. So Drakkhen is a fantasy adventure RPG that had come from kind of the Amiga and computer world, and it definitely shows as a 3D open world with flat shaded polygons, which was pretty advanced for its time, even though the frame rate not so good. But then when you would go inside of towns and dungeons and stuff like that, it would go to a 2D adventure game style gameplay. And I picked this up and I see a castle and I go in and I explore it a little bit, and then I start walking down a road and I hit a crossroads and a giant black dog head with red glowing eyes appears, zaps me with lasers from his eyes, and I die. I'm like, what the heck just happened? So I start it back up again, I wander around the world some more, and I find this hermit. And his voice is like this creepy chanting. And over, I keep finding all these weird things hidden all throughout the game that feel foreign, they feel alien, they feel almost wrong. And that's kind of where I left Drakkhen as a kid, was, man, that is a weird game and I don't quite understand it. Fast forward to being an adult, and I pick this up and I give it a try. And I will tell you right now, Drakkhen is a flawed game. The story is almost nonsensical to the point where they actually get some names wrong when attempting to tell the story. The gameplay is super weird and kind of all over the place, and yes, the theming and the sound effects and everything are psychedelic strange. But when you get past all of that, you actually have a pretty solid computer RPG here with a whole bunch of stuff to do, a lot of dungeons to explore, some interesting puzzles, some great character growth, and I actually played all the way through and completed this game and really enjoyed it. One thing I recommend if you want to go back to try Drakkhen again is right near the start. Head north from where you're at, find the hidden merchant, and buy a bow. Before you even hit level 5, buy a bow. It will change the way combat feels. It will change the balance of the game for the better. It will make it so that you can actually progress much more easily through this adventure. And once you've done that, give it a try. Let me know down in the comments if you can appreciate Drakkhen the way that adult Joe can now appreciate it. The next Super Nintendo game that I definitely think that you should give it a try, Lagoon. So Lagoon is another year one role-playing release, again from Kemco, and Lagoon is another one of those that when I initially picked it up, I wanted to like it, but the character's sword is so tiny. It's like you're stabbing him with a little, like, butter knife, right? And that totally threw me off as a kid. When I played Legend of Zelda, and my sword is nearly as big as my character, and I would play Crystallis, and my sword is, almost as long. And it was, I'm playing these action RPGs, and I've got these big swords, and then I play Lagoon, and I've got this tiny little pocket knife, and that in itself pretty much was the stopper for me on Lagoon as a kid. So I picked it up again as an adult, and tried it, and now I really can appreciate it a lot more than I could back then. So Lagoon, I mean, it's still weird to have such a tiny little sword, but I kind of understand what they were going for now. And what you have to understand is Lagoon is an Ys clone. The Ys series is based on this bump action combat in which when you just bump into an enemy, you do damage to them. Well, Lagoon started its life on the Sharp 68000, and that version of it used bump action just like Ys did. When they brought it to the Super Nintendo, it is a pretty faithful port, except they wanted to kind of appeal more to the Nintendo console Zelda crowd and made it so that you have to hit a button to slash your sword. Now, that in itself would have made the game incredibly easy to then give you a big sword like Zelda. So what I believe happened is that they balanced the game to still have the challenge of you taking damage and the enemy taking damage at approximately the same rate as you did back with the bump action stuff on the Sharp 68000. But in order to do so, they had to bring the characters really close together to ensure that you would take damage more often. Now, I can't guarantee that that was the logic that they went through, but that's definitely what it feels like when you play it kind of with modern eye and modern game design sensibilities. And with that in mind, it actually is a pretty solid Ys clone. Lots of dungeons, really kind of big dungeons, and some of them get a little repetitive, but most of them are fairly well designed. You've got a story that, while not translated the best, is interesting enough to keep my attention. You've got Save Anywhere, which is super handy because they were able to crank the difficulty on the bosses up to where you're just a sliver of your health between you and the boss, between victory and failure. And if you die, you don't have to rerun the dungeon as long as you save right before the boss. All that together makes Lagoon into a game that I actually really enjoyed playing all the way through. And definitely recommend, especially if you're an Ys fan, go back and give this one a try. It may be better than you remember. So speaking of Ys, we have Ys 3, Wanderers from Ys, which was a year one release for the Super Nintendo that, again, when I picked it up as a kid, it was hard. And it was this strange side-scrolling RPG. And I never really grew up with the Ys series, so I didn't know how weird that was. All I knew is it was an incredibly difficult side-scrolling RPG that I didn't really get very far in. Now, some people picked it up as Ys fans and saw it as like a black sheep of the series because it went side-scroller, much like Zelda 2, when the rest of the series was at a more traditional top-down view. But picking this up again as an adult, I came to appreciate that Ys 3 is actually an incredibly well-balanced RPG. Very fast action, requires a lot out of the player, and again, much like Lagoon, boss battles really take you down to where it's a sliver of your health versus a sliver of their health. Who's going to win this one, right? It is balanced down to kind of an art. But again, I was able to play all the way through this guy as an adult and really enjoyed it's got a huge world, it's got a really big kind of epic story to it, couple twists and turns, some pretty great graphics, some pretty great music. And if you can't pick this one up for the Super Nintendo, this did also come for TurboGrafx/PC Engine, the Sega Genesis, and even I was impressed to find out that the Nintendo Famicom, the 8-bit NES, even got an Ys 3 port in Japan. And it's not really like the kind of sad, watered-down port that you would expect going from a 16-bit game back to an 8-bit game. This is a pretty solid version of Ys 3 on the Famicom. So, however it is that you're able to play it, I recommend you give it a try because it is definitely a different experience. And no, I wouldn't say it's as good as Ys 1 and 2, but it's definitely a great experience to go in and try to complete if you're looking for some kind of a unique old school challenge. So that's 3 Super Nintendo RPGs that came out in the first year that we may have written off when we first checked them out because they were a little weird, or they were too difficult, or they were not what we were expecting. But I do recommend going back, checking these guys out, because they're actually quite a bit of fun. If you like videos like this, absolutely hit the subscribe button, hit that bell next to it. Love to keep showing you my content. Let me know down in the comments if there are any other RPGs that you would like to chat about, or if you have any memories that you'd like to share of any of these games. Did you enjoy them? Did you rage quit them? Love to hear your thoughts. And I thank you for your time, and I hope you have a great day.